Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the Improvisational Storytelling Podcast. Every week, we delve into our mind palaces and come up with fully formed and fully fleshed out ideas to give to you, our loyal listeners. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. Light the fire, put on a blanket, get some warm tea. It's story time. What elements did you guys have this week?
I have magic system.
I have sequel.
And I have beginning scene. Should we do magic system, beginning scene, sequel? No, probably sequel first, right?
Sure. So
Unless you want to hear the beginning scene, which is totally fine.
yeah, let's hear the beginning scene, and then I will tell you what the sequel is all about.
All right. So the beginning scene, it's a person, he's walking through the forest and he kind of comes out over, you guys have seen those pictures of like up in the mountains looking out over like Los Angeles or Denver, where it's just like in lights as far as you can see off into the distance. You guys know what pictures type of thing I'm talking about with that?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's kind of what he sees. And he's looking out over the sort of industrial age, he's thinking vaguely to himself about, it's very easy to get lost in this kind of network system. He thinks to himself about how the lines of streets and street lights and industrial buildings and skyscrapers are kind of laid out like a circuit board, and then there's a rumbling, and it says in the book, right on time, out of the ocean comes a giant hand, like hundreds and hundreds of feet in size, and it smashes down onto the port and destroys a bunch of stuff. And he's looking at this, and he keeps talking about the buzzing, as if 100 million bees buzzing. They're buzzing, and this thing slowly, another hand comes and smashes down. And you get this sort of idea in the writing that he's kind of come to expect all of these things. Like he knew that this was going to happen. He's been prepared for it, or he's been waiting for it. Maybe even some comments about how no one else believed him. But, in a few seconds, all of the sort of port, the first couple of miles of society where the ocean is, has just been destroyed. And the thing finally reaches up its head out of the water, and he stares in horror at his own face. And then he stirs and wakes up and goes to the window, and he's no longer up on the mountain. Now he's inside of the network. He's inside of the city, and, wonders, he's been having this dream for a while now, wonders what in the world it means. That's the beginning scene.
Cool. So
Hopefully it throws all of you guys off.
well, I don't know. Might work out. We'll have to see. But the sequel is, I think we had talked when we drew this that having sequel, kind of in light of the one we just did, we could do sequel or prequel would be kind of a interesting twist to that. And I mulled it over. And as much as I'd like to use prequel sometime, because we've always done sequel, where in this one we had a clear idea that this was obviously the middle, and there was something before and then something after.
Right.
But in thinking about the ideas for story or where it could go, we kind of fleshed out, a basic idea. I would think that the prequel would pretty much just be like a Tom Clancy book, kind of spy, espionage, big exciting thing happening, are they going to make it in time?
Right.
Kind of deal going on. And so I do want to do prequel sometime, but not this time. It will be a sequel.
Great.
So to bring up something like completely different with as far as like a genre where you'd have in this series, if you haven't listened to the one we just did that this was now a sequel to, go listen to those. They're pretty good. I think it scored, average to above enough.
Yeah.
And so, kind of giving that, each of these things kind of takes a different genre where, like I just explained, the prequel would technically be, kind of spy, espionage, modern day technology, and like
Right.
something big is
Right.
happening and, stuff like that. Where then the
So you're
second
gonna
one is
do
kind of post-apocalyptic, right? And then you have the
yeah.
third one and then we can take it wherever we want. I think with what I think I'm setting up here would give, a wide range of, options for different things to unfold. But if we remember in the last one, it kind of ended with the kind of like ships coming out of a portal, entering the atmosphere, from deep space, coming to check up on, their kind of mother planet, after many years of kind of non-communication.
Right.
Right. And so that's not that this picks up then. It could have been, a while since then. It could be a few years. It could be a couple hundred. Well, we can figure that out. But basically what happened is for the idea of, space and other planets and travel, all these people coming back, there'll be different kinds of people, but as they've lived on other planets or in space, they've kind of, moved on to those atmospheres, and after years and years, so they look alien, although they're humanoid, right? They
Right.
all have like a humanoid-esque thing, but, as they've developed to the structure of these different places they've lived now for
Yeah. Lower gravity or different light, different styles of light. Absolutely.
right. And so it's not something like they come back to Earth and they're just gonna, retain their human form now, because they've, just like, if we, let's say, went to Mars or something like that, the atmosphere pressure, the light difference, it'd take a couple generations, but, people might be starting to like be taller, have a different bone density, different,
Right. Exactly.
adaptations to the environment they're in. And it's not going to change right away if you go back somewhere else. And so what this does look like to the people on Earth, right, at this present time, wouldn't necessarily be an alien invasion, but these people are alien to them, right? They come back and they've got the technology advanced
Right.
beyond what they would have had before the collapse. And so they kind of come back, and I don't think Reed would be, but I'm pretty sure you're familiar with Gintama, Levi.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. That's kind of where my mind was going. Something kind of like that, except in that they are aliens, but in this, they are the people, but they're kind of bringing all these different amalgamations of technology. And basically what happens is they reset up kind of a government on Earth, right? And it's not, and I'd say maybe there was some war or something as they were kind of realizing that this is, they've come back to a place that's, very primitive. And so they set up kind of like this weird federation government where it's kind of subjugated the people of Earth. Life kind of goes on, but now there's kind of like humans on Earth are like a subclass. They can hold different positions. They're kind of a part of some things, but
but they lost their technology, so they're kind of looked down on. It's like, well, you guys couldn't even survive the 2,000 years. You guys lost all of your technology.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what's set up. And so there would be obvious some tension between, different, groups that, having from the last one kind of arising, setting up their own kind of things, reestablishing some amounts of civilization. And now all of a sudden you have these people. And I would say that the whole nanotechnology that they would have had maybe doesn't work perfectly on Earth. So it's not like they're extremely superior, but they kind of then like hack job in part of their technology. Because again, if you're familiar with Gintama, the idea is that in Gintama, the aliens that come, it's kind of what would that be? Kind of a parody or a euphemism of the opening of Japan.
Right.
So you have all these like foreign countries coming in, and they kind of set up their own influences over the government, and life kind of goes on, and most people kind of go on, but they kind of then now have to kind of weave through the social structure of this kind of other thing there.
Right. Absolutely.
And so that's kind of where it is. That's what we have set up here. So you have kind of now the world inundated with like a higher upper class of, aliens that aren't aliens as they would be. that are kind of above everybody because they, they've got technology. And so they kind of run all the networks, and they've reset up, the
A
kind
bunch
of
of
the
the
power
industry
grid, and kind of,
Right,
but it's
right.
hodgepodge together to kind of fit into what they can make work. It's not the old technology of before, but it's kind of, now like a vacation hub too, from people from other places that come in, to see the
Right.
old world. And, so I don't, that's kind of what we have going on, and where the sequel goes from there. We can, figure out what's happening, if, there's some of these people are tyrants, or if it's, just life is going on. It's very different, and very different than what was kind of expecting to be happening towards the end of the last one. But I think it could go just about anywhere, given that the hodgepodge of how they're mixing their technology and having kind of the class difference, and
Absolutely.
stuff like that. But that's where the sequel takes place. So it could be 10 years after, 100 years after, 5 years after, who knows, where we want to take it. But that's kind of what's set up.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, I guess I might as well introduce Magic System. It was kind of interesting to me anticipating the sequel thing, because we had a kind of an a-magical, not necessarily anti-magical, but an a-magical, the pantheon. Remember, in the very beginning of this last 3-part series, was a society that had really denied the divine as just fantasies of primitive men, to making up stories to explain things they didn't understand. And so everything was very materialistic, very real, scientific. And that was the kind of the orientation. Even the things that appeared magical, so to speak, with the nanobots and whatnot, that was just, recognizable, explainable, technological and biotechnical reality. It wasn't
Right.
really magic, so to speak. So, but there has this new story has a definite magic introduction, and I'm calling it divine empowerment, heralded by angelic messengers. And I just got really excited when you were talking about the beginning scene, because there's some stuff fixing to go down. And I had it in my mind that this we're setting up here. Obviously, the people. Originally, the way I had used this random insert in the previous story was this space mission, 3 ships. Seth called them the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. But anyway, these ships come, from a far distant planet, and it,
Right.
generational space travel using cryo technology and whatnot. And I had to check on their progeny. But as we were telling the story, it kind of changed to be coming back to the mother planet, and which that I thought that was a cool change. So here they are coming back, and they find them, in the throes of a semi-primitive society, having, post-apocalyptic breakdowns of infrastructure and systems, so to speak. And so now, and I also the fighting style we introduced in the last one was sort of a rebellion against that kind of hyper scientific, rationalistic, naturalistic view of everything.
Right.
Whereas, warfare or whatever had been reduced to just mastery of weapons and bringing to bear superior force. And among a few for whom, honor and valor and courage and loyalty have been rescued virtues from an increasingly cynical society, they formed this kind of this martial art form, and it arose incorporating kind of what can be imagined, and like in the fighting, the grace and beauty of form, whereas most of the people that were involved in any kind of enforcement, so to speak, it was function over form. Well, for these people, because it's kind of a metaphysical base. There's, they seek grace and beauty of form, but that actually yields astonishing functionality. And what I see in our new story is divine empowerment. In other words, there is a force out there, like call him the creator of the universe or whatever, and he's reached out to anybody that is reaching for something higher, and he has empowered these martial artists, and we didn't come up with a name for it, but
Right.
but there is a divine consciousness that has chosen to communicate with select individuals to lead different efforts, and granting them kind of a divine empowerment. And I'm going to leave it at that. It could be, like in resisting the new, the problem children that came home and have set up shop and are now, subjugating these local indigenous people who are actually their forebears, descended from their forebears. There's a growing resistance among people that, cherish liberty and decency and, being good to each other.
So just as a clarification, you made the Pantheon the magic system, right? Basically, technically.
Well, what was a reintroduction of what the Pantheon had always been, but had just been ignored.
Okay, interesting.
So I have a bit of world building that might tie into a little bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
So one of the things that could be going on, because I know in like the other one, be it nuclear war or whatever was, going on, you also had these nanobots. And a lot of then that fallout was cleaned up by these things, cleaning it up, basically. However, let's say it decommissioned it, but basically made a different element. They were no longer nanobots, but they had basically isolated and, solidified or made a substance or whatever to clean out the atmosphere, the water and all this stuff from the apocalyptic happenings.
Okay.
And they weren't necessarily then accessible. So when they used up like all the nanotechnology that was on the earth, in the climax of the last one,
right,
this
when
stuff
Teach
is still
used it
around.
all.
Right. So this stuff would still be around, but it's not, it's no longer, nanobots, because it's, they're, I don't know how to say it, but it's something else. And I don't know if it's like maybe these people coming back find it as a delicacy, or it's a different kind of like power unit thing. And so maybe that's what they are reestablishing. I was kind of thinking of like, almost like the idea of like on Rick and Morty, where his battery has a world in it where they're all like running on a treadmill and they think that their world is great and all that, whatever,
Yeah.
but really they're powering Rick's car battery. And so thinking that maybe, because this stuff is laying all over the place or sunk into the ground, so there's a lot of like, let's say, mining operations, and whatever, there could be something in it that is either some sort of power source or an alternate, maybe they just find that it's, pretty to look at. I don't know. Something. And so they've basically, that's what they're having everybody do. And so it's like, it's structured work to go mine all this stuff and refine it or whatever it is. And so that's where then society is like, oh, wow. And now we have, power and everything kind of, runs and it's fine. So if we just kind of, go along with this, we'll have a good job and we'll have our, this new technology that's super cool that we never had before. And does that make sense?
Yeah, I have a radically strange idea.
Okay.
And you guys, please tell me if you think it's a terrible one. Have you guys seen Breaking Bad?
No.
I've seen some of the early episodes.
Synopsis is guy gets lung cancer, hates his life, starts cooking meth.
He was like a former chemistry teacher or something?
Sure. That's regardless what I'm saying, but synopsis is guy gets lung cancer, starts cooking meth in order to leave money and legacy and to feel alive. Right? It's a terrible show. It's really well written, but it makes me feel depressed, so I don't watch it. But there's this scene in it where he meets with his like old chemistry partners. So he's a chemistry teacher, a high school chemistry teacher, but he's like a genius. and he was like kind of cut off by like his other partners when he was younger and went back to being just a high school teacher. And he talks to them, and he reveals to them that he has lung cancer, and they offer to pay for all of it. But in his arrogance and in his selfishness, he refuses, and subsequently commits tons of crimes, ends up killing people just so that he could feel like he was the one who made it happen. So under that idea, here is my hypothesis. These people have come, and they're trying to help the humans of Earth get their planet back. But the humans of Earth are irritated at the benevolence of these quote unquote aliens, right? In the same way, someone who is, you might feel like someone who is very rich, who doesn't need to worry about certain aspects of a financial thing. And when they talk about it in a sort of a cavalier way, it makes you feel kind of irritated at them. It can.
Yeah.
In that same way, they are just here they are not the bad guys. That's my hypothesis.
Oh,
they
okay.
are literally just here trying to help humanity, Earth's humanity, get back on its feet.
Yeah.
But there are criminal elements inside of their own culture and inside of Earth's culture, which are working very hard at making it seem like they're coming and lording over us. So when you first experience the book, it seems like they're lording over us. My idea for the hero is that he's like the Earth human police force working with the alien police force. So like the worst of the worst, like the tax collectors in the ancient Jewish world.
Yeah.
He works with the bad guys, and the villain is the kind of guerrilla rebellion guy.
Okay.
Right. So I'm reading this book about nihilism, and it talks about how at the end stage of nihilism, you tend to be obsessed with not the fact that there are no rules, not the fact that there is no answer to the question, and there is no question, but just obsessed with the idea of there being nothing at all. Like wanting to get back to a place of there actually being no conceptual reality that exists in any way.
Yeah. And
that whoever it is that's working towards that goal, that is the villain. He was thwarted when Teach woke up, 1,500 years ago. He was thwarted when the ships orbiting Earth picked up the use of nanobots by Teach and were able to wake up enough that the ships thousands of light years away were able to start communicating again. And they were like, oh my gosh, something's happening. It looks like they finally woke up. We need to go check it out. Right? He was thwarted with that. He was thwarted when they arrived. And his goal is to break down. And since the aliens are here, I'm not saying all of them are good. I'm not saying they're all benevolent. But the overall arch of them is we're here to help humanity. We're Earth's humanity. Because we're humans too. We are humanoid. But we're here to help Earth's humanity. Does that sound like a terrible idea?
No, it's got interesting story possibilities, I think.
Seth?
Yeah, no, I think that works with what's going on.
Yeah. I like it because not because invading alien force is a played out cliche, but we can really dig heavily into the fact that it's been so long that like just the communication, the language barrier and the communication barrier is at such a level that it's actually kind of difficult for them to talk to each other,
Yeah.
There could even have been like the reason why it's so difficult is because there was some kind of great war between Earth and all of these other places, and they kind of put a virus in. They did something to make it more difficult to communicate. I don't know. I just have this feeling.
I don't think you would need that. I think you would just have, you look at the English language and, 300 years ago, you wouldn't have understood what people were saying, even though you're speaking English.
True.
right? And another couple hundred years before that. So as things change, especially with a catastrophe, or subgroups adapting how they speak, and how speech is then capable in their other atmospheres and their other environments, and it strays for a couple thousand years, I think you
Yeah.
would naturally be left with, even if they all left speaking the same language, they'd come back and it would be at least the difference between English and German.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking back to the last story where Tyrone, the guy of the withered hand, he was kind of trying to set up kind of a warlord situation where he was most comfortable being in charge, and was hoping to, but then Teach wakes up and kind of thwarts his plans, and then whatever was going on then, and then the newcomers show up, and I don't know, it's that same spirit, maybe not descendant from Tyrone so much, but it's a recognizable, the villain is recognizable here. And he's like taking advantage of what I've written down. I called it a pride-based resistance, that kind of like when you were talking about people resisting because they want to be the one to do it.
Right.
I saw an interview, a famous Hollywood actress,
Right.
who just made it real. Obviously, she's doing real well, right? She's got cash. She says her parents still live very modestly, and she still absolutely, cannot. She gets together with her parents, and her dad refuses to let her pick up the tab. Yeah, I'm not going to have my baby girl paying for my dinner. It's kind of,
Right.
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 And they're perfectly self-sufficient. They don't need a handout from her. You know what I mean? And it's sort of like, but, and I'm saying that there's an honorable side to that human characteristic,
Right.
and yet there's a pride base that could be at the edge of that the villain could exploit as far as building his resistance and his
Right.
Yeah.
Part of my thought process is that maybe this is getting too far into it, but is that the alien coalitions, their federations, their systems, some of them are bad, right? Some of them have bad elements in them. They're not all these kind of benevolent, angelic figures.
Right.
Right. But part of me thinks what it's going to come down to is the reality that they have to leave. They can't hurry them along. It's
Okay.
like we couldn't take a time machine back and give an excavator to a Neolithic man. And,
Yeah.
it's like the pharaohs wouldn't know what to do with a crane. And having a crane and then showing them how to use it and building all the pyramids for them, then they don't get to be the ones who made the pyramids.
Yeah.
I feel like that is maybe the end. What's going to be the end result of this is that these coalition of outworlders just kind of decide, well, we're going to leave then. Or they either that, or they have the really hands-off approach where they're helping people and doing industry, but never stepping in and demanding that the humans organize themselves into it's like, well, you should be organized into a government that represents each person, and how we do it, we do it like this.
Mm-hmm.
We mind meld and then work through all of our issues as one great consciousness for 2 weeks out of every year, and then our society runs perfectly. And the humans are like, well, we can't mind meld. And they're like, well, learn.
Yeah.
Or we, whatever, there's each alien, each different outworlder has their own tactic, and they're kind of pushing their solutions onto humans, and it's all well and good. They want it to work, but it's that hotbed of area where the humans have this ability. They need to rise up. But the temptation to be irritated and to be prideful and to be resentful exists, and to rebel exists, and all these things.
Well, you do know that all the problems in our current world is due to Western civilization's arrogance, white supremacy, and colonialism, right? Or maybe flush toilets are a good idea. I don't know.
So I'm thinking with the way that that works is, I think from all these different places, being that they would have assumed Earth was part of their federation, but now they show up and they don't have a representative. So they step in, right? And so over time, you'll have all these different approaches coming on, because they'll have like they kind of set up like a provincial government, but it's always changing because, they have elections off world, right?
Right.
And so then the people that are kind of helping the human like authorities run to catch up to speed, some are like helpful and like, teach them how to, mine a certain ore so they can power the things. And some people just come in and be like, well, we need, and they take a different approach where they just, bulldoze a neighborhood to build the power plant to do it the way they want to do it. And and then it could be a couple years later and those people have changed. And so let's say the little people could be sitting here just thinking like only seeing one side or seeing that it's not always consistent. And so if they get into it, they find that, some are more helpful, and some people understand that, they are trying to help, but different, let's say culturally, separated groups are going to have a different approach, and some are more benevolent and some are just not good. And as that changes, it takes and moves the the effectiveness of what's happening, on kind of a roller coaster, which would give some people arguably reason to be rebellious.
Right.
But then I don't know, that'd be one way to look at it.
Absolutely. There's also this option. There's this reality that all of these, how do you say it? Outworlders view Earth as like kind of a holy place, and so anytime one of them gets the option to like be in charge, they're, we're going to rebuild the Himalayas.
The glory of Rome.
Yeah, we're going to rebuild the Himalayas. And it's like, you're the what's? The Himalayas, the mountains that were over here. And it's like, all right. And so people starve, the power plants don't work because this one group they really want to rebuild the Himalayas. And then the next group come in and they're like, what we have to do is we have to bring all of the animals back. So we're going to do complex genetic work. Yeah. And it's like, okay. And what you end up having is this kind of amalgamation of technology on Earth, which is perfect because Earth is going to take its seat, its place in a place of primacy once all of the humans, all of the Earthlings kind of become, once they figure out their purpose, they are basically being taught how to use all of the people's technology. So like they're being set up to take a prime seat at the table of this giant federation. But in this interim spot, it's very difficult, and there's lots of things that are going on, and a lot of things that aren't happening right, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's some good world building. Let's call it there, and then we'll come back next week to add some more stuff. Sound good? You guys got anything else you want to add in before
I
we
think that's good for
sign
now.
off?
I'm good.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better, the Improvisational Storytelling Podcast. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have any suggestions, if you just want to say hi, send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com or message us on Twitter at @getsbettercast. We are happy to hear from you, and we are hopeful that you will share this podcast and episodes with your family and friends, your dear, kind, old grandmothers, anyone you think would enjoy it. We'd be happy to have them here. All right. We'll talk to you guys next week. Bye.